Radio presents The Center with your host, DC Radical One.
Greetings, Black family, and welcome to On the Wake Up Radio. I am your host, DC Radical One, and you have entered the center. Shout out to our wonderful producer, Cindy Ashby. You can check us out on SoundCloud, YouTube, iTunes Podcast, Google Play, Stitcher, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and on the Wake Up Radio, and also on otwtube.com. That's otwtube.com. It's been a long time. This is actually my first show of the year. I've never done a show at this time, so I'm not expecting a lot of people to catch this live. But the way my schedule is working out, this is the time that I have allotted. My whole work professional life has been kind of turned upside down recently. Excuse me. And so currently there's a time of the day I have available, time of the week I have available. And so I will do several shows at this time during the week and see if I can find an audience to balance out the audience that I probably lost from people who are used to me doing shows on the weekend, on Sundays at 2 to 4 p.m. The chances of returning to Sundays, there's a possibility of that, but the chances of being at that time are very slim, unless something unforeseen takes place, which is always a possibility. So today I just wanted to discuss for an hour Black History Month, because it is Black History Month. I originally wanted to do this show on the first day of Black History Month, but YouTube was not cooperating. It's just one of those things. I still have one strike on my my YouTube account. Seem to just accumulate strikes over and over again for various things. The last strike was for quote unquote medical misinformation for a video. Actually, it was an advertisement for one of Brother Jeannie's lectures for back in May. And they gave me the strike like in December. So those things last 90 days. I got another one for a private presentation that I did via YouTube dealing with the Great Reset. And we will deal with the Great Reset further in a future show. That'll be one where I need to have more time and delve into some things and load up some videos and things like that. I actually tried to load up a video today discussing the life of Dr. Carter G. Woodson. And for whatever reason, I was unable to do that, even though earlier I had loaded that video up and another video up dealing with the descendants of the youngest person on the slave ship, Clotilda, and her family, finding out her history, and then talking about their family's history of activism. This is a very interesting video. I was not able to get it fully downloaded for whatever reason, so I will make that part of a future show. I think people will be interested in seeing that because what I plan to do is really deal with the identity crisis of the African in America, as well as the African around the world. Everybody wants to be African or South Africans, and it's a severe problem seemingly becoming more severe by the day. Something that's been exploited to cause division amongst our people. You have the quote unquote diaspora wars on Twitter. People like Tariq Nasheed stoking the fires with his FBA movement. You have the ADOS people, and purportedly there's supposed to be some immigrant black people who are against reparations, which I don't see. That doesn't make any sense to me. And really, I can't verify that. It's just stuff you see online. For all we know, it's probably hats, masquerading as black people. And of course, being completely honest, if a lot of times the people that they send over here from the continent, excuse me, a lot of times are Negroes. What we have to understand is our history here, the knowledge of it on the continent is very limited. And when you talk to people on the continent, they know Martin Luther King, they may know Malcolm X, they know, and that's pretty much it. You know, their knowledge of our history here is as limited as our knowledge of their history on the continent. And what's interesting is I remember talking to a sister just probably 10 years ago. I believe she was from Kenya. Um, she was saying that their knowledge of their own history on the continent is very limited. And she said, yeah, we receive a colonial education. She said it just like that. And I was like, for whatever reason, I was surprised because my thinking was, and I would love to get somebody from the continent to really explain it. My thinking was that when colonialism ended, and that's in different time frames in different countries, because you go to Southern Africa, of course, South Africa. You're talking about the 90s. Other parts of Southern Africa, you're talking about the 80s. Ghana, you're talking about the 50s. So, different time frames for different countries on the continent. But my thought was that the first thing you would do is revamp the educational system and, you know, remove the lies and tell the stories, especially of the freedom fighters, and work your way backwards. I'm not sure, the different countries had different processes for education, but it seems that the education that they receive is very limited with the knowledge of themselves as the formal education that we receive here in the hills of North America has been for a long time. Which brings us, of course, to Dr. Carter G. Woodson and his movement to bring Black education, African history, African American history, quote unquote, or Negro history, as it was stated at the time. His work to bring that to the forefront, um, that kind of goes hand in hand. I think the lack of knowledge amongst Black people is very detrimental, and it allows us to not see each other. Myself, for those that have been listening to me for a while, you know that I started this journey 30 years ago. Um, about 30 years ago as a teenager. And it was books like The Destruction of Black Civilization, and indeed books like Autobiography of Malcolm X, books like um, eventually books like Secret Relationship Between Blacks and Jews, books like Urugu by Mama Marimba Ani, various books by Dr. John Henry Clark, Amos Wilson, Dr. Yusuf Ben Yakinen, I guess I say Amos Wilson, Dr. Shaka Musa Barashango, uh, and lectures with Steve Coakley, Dr. Khalid, all of these people all of them who were alive at the time when I first got knowledge. So it was a different atmosphere. And many of these people who um, had dedicated their life to Black people and had studied here and on the continent, had documented our history, had going to the libraries. If you ever been to the Library of Congress, for example, like there are sections with like deep historical books going way back, and but a lot of that stuff is, at least in the times when I went, because I had known some people there at the time. Those sections are not part of the main area where the public has access to a lot of times. So a lot of, even to this day, a lot of our history is hidden in places like that, and we can only imagine. Um, who knows what the Vatican has underneath it as far as our history? I mean, we have no idea what they have. Um, we know that much of the history of Black people around the world is stored away, hidden, or openly displayed in museums of white people around the world. Whether we're talking about the Louvre, or we're talking about the British Museum, or we talk about Smithsonian, excuse me, wherever it may be, these world-renowned museums and these world-renowned institutions that Europeans have a lot of Black history, a lot of African history in them, and yet the knowledge of our history, our culture, our traditions, our folkways, our mores is still largely forgotten, obscured for our people. It's caused an identity crisis, and I just found out that Baba Mwalimu Burudi, who has been very instrumental in my psychological, spiritual, moral development with his scholarship, has released a book called Identity. So, I guess in a way, kind of all thinking on the same level. I had no idea till yesterday, last night, that he had that book and it's out. I believe it's on Amazon. Um, but he said it's not on his website yet. So I'm gonna see if I can get in contact with Baba Barudi and get an interview with him. Hopefully, uh, hopefully this month. During Black History Month, so we can talk about the identity crisis of Black people here. I really want not not this show. I wanted to this show, but I'm gonna wait a little while to see if I can, like I said, develop the audience, recapture my audience, as it were. So maybe I'll do it on a Sunday. But I really wanted to get into, excuse me, the uh, the identity crisis of Black people and the division that's being sown, and deal with this, some of this the slave trade never happened talk. Um, the slave trade happened in reverse. Um, we're not African, we're Native American. All of that. People have been asking me for a long time now, maybe a year and a half, to publicly address this. I never felt it's one of those things that you don't even want to give life to, because you feel like it's ridiculous, you know. But it's one of those things that it's continued to grow. And it's interesting because it's continued to grow as blonde weaves have continued to grow, as tattoos on our faces have continued to grow, as our people, young people shooting each other, that cycle begins to grow again, which is, to me, is very frustrating, because that's something in my life. I was part of an organization that we fought against that in the late 80s. Yeah. Well, the organization, they started before I got there, but you know, something that, yeah, the late 80s, early 90s, and DC was the murder capital, and So I guess I started that. It started doing that work in the organization in the early '90s, not the late '80s. But it still was a teenager, and to see that the violence continues in our communities, our young people still getting murdered. I've had relatives, I had friends who I've lost to what I call self murder, not in what they call in the not in self deletion in the sense of one's personal self, but as a black person deleting another black person. That self hatred manifests into violence, which causes us to destroy ourselves. I've lost people to that. While you know, um, after spending years fighting against that, I've seen how drugs affects people. After spending years fighting against that, I've seen really enough. And really, I mean, I'll be honest. I've seen a decline in our people after working for years to educate our people and to organize our people and to um, try to help our people to elevate ourselves psychologically, um, studying, African Center psychology, studying philosophy, studying um, politics from a black perspective, and trying to teach these things and being part of different organizations. And I'll be completely honest. I'll be completely candid. We are in as bad a shape mentally, spiritually, and psychologically as we were when I first came into this movement. And when I first got knowledge back in again the late '80s, when that first book was put in my hand and I began to study the knowledge of myself. Um, our people are in as bad or worse shape. I would say, maybe possibly this guy, man, we're in worse shape. We're in worse shape. The lack of knowledge of ourselves, the lack of our me and in fact me and brother Irritated Janie were talking about that. We were like, our people don't even have an identity, so we have to give our people an identity. We have to restore their identity, restore who they are, remove the Zionist induced amnesia in order for black people to even be able to organize, to be able to resist the various assaults on black people. That's how bad it is. That I've never seen this many blonde wigs and weaves on black women in my life. I've never seen this many contacts in my life. I've done shows talking about skin bleaching. And this is around the world. I mean, Jamaica skin bleaching is just totally off the chain, out of pocket. In Africa, skin bleaching. They advertise it publicly on big billboards and whatnot. The worship of the worship of white Jesus on the continent is worse here. We're in bad shape. I'm just being honest. A lot of people that come on these platforms, and we got the gender wars, and people spend every single day arguing black man against black woman every single day on this platform, and people get thousands of views, and nothing is resolved because nothing is discussed within the context of white domination and Zionist hegemony and psychological warfare. And as Baba Rudy says, put everything in the context of being at war, or Dr. Collar put it, being warred upon. He said, you may not be at war, but other people are certainly at war with you, and that's a fact. And we see the results of the psychological and spiritual and physical and financial offensive against black people and in all areas of people activity, including health. A health offensive right now going on with the Fauci, um, and the jab, and the World Economic Forum's plans, and Bill Gates and all that, which we'll get into another show, and we'll get into it, and we'll have visual aids. I'll do the visual aid thing. I was going to do the visual aid thing today. My tech didn't want to. My tech didn't want to work for me for whatever reason. So be it. So we're going back to old school and doing it radio style today. But I look at the landscape of our people, and we're very much in the place where um where Dr. Carter G. Woodson talked about with the miseducation of the Negro, where even when you see somebody and you think they're resisting or they're standing up, I looked at they were talking about the coach Brian Flores, and I might do a short form video on him and talk about the situation with the NFL and coaching hires and things like that. And I saw it, and I was like, I'm not really one to try to be where I'm not wanted, but at the same time, people are, I think you're there already. You're part of that system. You're helping players make millions of dollars, and yet you're being stopped from making advancement in your field. So I can understand. I supported him from the fact that I can understand his why he had a problem with the situation, right? And it's been an ongoing issue. And of course, the NFL is a private, in essence, a private boys club. They can really do what they want. Of course, racial discrimination happens there. The black coaches are held to a different standard. It's obvious. You have coaches who fail and they get to come back, they get a second job. And you get black coaches. A lot of times you get black coaches, they fired for, of course, now they got an extra game. But at the time, people going 7-9, 8-8, 9-7, and being fired, which is mediocre. But many times the black coaches get the job that is the worst in the league. And then you bring it up to mediocrity and you get fired. Or you go through a situation where the team is trying to trade away players and whatnot. And then you, as the black coach, you get fired. So I understand the situation, and I was supportive of the move of the brother at the time. Peace and Black Power, straight Black Power, the brother Patrick. And then I saw that the brother's married to a European. And so, here we are. So the person that's trying to kick in the door still and complains about racism, white supremacy, doesn't understand racism, white supremacy, because he's in the bedroom with racism, white supremacy. And then, so seeing that, I look at it from a different lens. I'm like, he thinks because he has capitulated and has the European female in his bedroom, thus he's supposed to get the same treatment as the European. No. You know what I'm saying? So, I mean, you see stuff like that, and it's a manifestation of the psychological illness of our people and the lack of proper understanding of our history and zero understanding of our culture. So it's very, it's very interesting. The people like Dr. Carter G. Woodson um, and others who followed him, all that they done to try to bring our history to our people, and yet we still use it to love our enemy. And then, of course, the education we're given, like we talked about earlier. I mean, it hasn't changed for the better, but at the same time, you can't expect your enemy to educate your children properly. Malcolm X talked about that. And as I was talking about earlier with colonialism, excuse me, one of the first things that took place with black people here in America is as soon as chattel slavery was over, and as soon as black people were able to get land and start building towns and things like that, one of the first things we did was build schools. I mean, there were one room schools, and you had children of various ages, and the person, sister or brother, many times a sister, who could read, started to educate the children in how to read, which in a society like this that's based on a written word, Western societies are based very much on a written word, where on the continent, and even in Arabia to a certain degree, a lot of that culture is based more, or those cultures, excuse me, based more on the oral tradition. And so our people, even coming out of this, think about this, coming out of chattel enslavement, understood that education was the most important thing to establish. But even before what we think of in a modern economic sense, like the economy that they were doing amongst each other was more of a barter system at the beginning, because you had different people who were skilled in different things. One of the things that we don't understand, or really is glossed over, is that during enslavement, people, African people, had different skills and were doing the work. Since they were doing the work, everything that was being done at that time, black people were skilled in doing it. And that didn't change until you had the rise of the unions with Samuel Gompers. And that is discussed in The Secret Relationship Between Blacks and Jews, Volume 2. So, we think of slavery as picking cotton or some other crop. And that was a large part of it in some areas. But greetings to Sister Shaniqua. But I give a perfect example, because people don't know this, and our ancestors put it in they put it in such a way that it shows us how our culture is interwoven into stuff, and we don't even know it. So, the wrought iron fences and the wrought iron gates that you put on a screen door, right? The designs that you often see, like at the top of the fence where you had the round and look like two circles coming together, that's an Adinkra symbol. And you see that on those at the top of the fences, and you see it on some of the you see it on the gates, the wrought iron gates. And I know that the Sankofa symbol is one of them that's used, and there's another one that's used, and I can't really remember. And it's bad because I actually have two Adinkra dictionaries, so the fact I can't remember what the other symbol is, it's a little funny, but it's early in the morning. And so when people try to say that we're not African and this and this and that, we literally have African iconography imbued into the culture of America, and it's hidden in plain sight, because now that we aren't the ones who are doing it, that stuff is the template and the standard design, and very few people know what it means. Even the people who use the design to this day, they don't know the history of it. You see what I'm saying? And so that's just one of the little things that we see that shows the our African identity hidden in plain sight. But because we don't know our history, we don't know our culture, we don't know our traditions, it just goes right by us. And we continue to stumble along in the madness despite people like Dr. Carter G. Woodson's work of trying to dig up the history and make it something that um, can be beneficial to us. But also at the time, and this is the aspect I kind of disagree with, but I understand at the time to prove to the world that we were equal to and had made a contribution to the world. Um, I now we're at the point in my belief, we're at the point where we don't have to prove to other people our worth because we are the originators of everything. In essence, you know what I'm saying? Like that which is called civilization and that which makes it up: mathematics, science, philosophy, spirituality, the concept of marriage. All these things are African concepts. The idea that a man finds a woman and he's with her the rest of his life and they produce children and the children become a family, and then you take that family and you add on to another family, and that's the building blocks of a society and a nation. You have clans and tribes and then kingdoms and nations and empires, but the foundation of all that is man and woman. That is in itself an African concept. That is not a European concept. The European concept is completely different. We'll get into that on another day, right? But the whole basis of what is called civilization, which starts with the family, is African. The whole science of agriculture is African. The whole idea of burying the dead is African. The whole idea of mapping the stars, right? The whole idea of navigation is African. The idea of a calendar is African. You see what I'm saying? So black people were doing all these things before we even knew that. For anybody had went to the cave and saw Europeans there and were like, "Oh, what was that?" We had done all these things. Dr. John Henry Clark said that African history, half of African history was over before the European came on the world stage. Paraphrasing. He said African civilization was old and tired when Europe started to rise. And a lot of that has been lost. Even those who study ancient Kemet, there is been debate for years about the calendar system and whether or not the European is cutting off. I believe it's like a 2,000 year difference between what the Europeans say and what the Africans say, what many African scholars say. So they push that Kemetic history even further back in the time, which then the Kemetic history goes all the way into the root of that civilization is in southern Africa, and they came down the Nile and built further down the Nile until you reach, in essence, a peak of ancient Kemet, right? But the roots of that is thousands of years older. So that's something that people don't talk about. That's how ancient of a people we are, and that's how profound our history is. And in a time where black people are lost and confused, in a time where Men want to be women, and women want to be men, and children want to be adults, and many adults want to be children. In a time where black women want to look white, and white women want to look black, and both of them, as what I saw one sister post one time, she's like, both of them are trying to look like mulattoes, and everybody wants to be something they're not, and nobody that's African, the Africans on the continent don't want to be African, the Africans in the diaspora don't want to be African, but the Chinese and the white man want to go to Africa and be African. In the time of total confusion, uh, greetings to Lord Bell. Um, in the time of total confusion, our history, our culture, and our traditions are more important now than they've been since the time of Dr. Carter G. Woodson, because we had a small renaissance a few years ago, and now we've fallen even further back than we were then. And the difference is we don't have a John Henry Clark alive to lead the way. We don't have a Dr. Khalid Abdul Muhammad right now to lead the way. We don't have an Amos Wilson to give us the proper analysis. We don't have people who are dedicated to our people and who hate our enemies. I mean, there's a dearth of that. We had a plethora of those types of people when I was young. We had fakers and pretenders a few years ago. But I say, outside of Straight Black Pride, outside of Brother Genie and other brothers, we are struggling to put forth credible, dedicated, uh, um, uncompromising leadership and even spokesmanship, where we're having trouble even finding black people to come out and tell the truth and not try to bamboozle the people, not try to flim flam the community. And I mean, somebody told me, and Lord Bill, you may know, or Brother Patrick, one of y'all may know. Somebody told me that, for example, just use him as an example, because he was very popular, seemingly not too long ago. Somebody told me Young Pharaoh has an OnlyFans. I thought that's what I saw. If I'm wrong, y'all correct me, right? I you know I saw the post, and I just let's just say, even if I don't think highly of a person, um, I don't normally publicly attack people. And the reason why, being completely honest, I'm gonna tell you, I'm God honest truth. When I was young, Elijah Muhammad used that people used to tell me the Elijah Muhammad quote of "Put the clean glass to the dirty glass." And with that, I always believe that if someone isn't sincere in this movement, because of the little bit of notoriety and the money and things like that can get to your head, if you're not sincere, you expose yourself. You'll stumble and fall. You'll take missteps that will, you know, you, you know, to paraphrase Ice Cube, you will wreck yourself before you check yourself. And there's a lot of people that we've seen uh, at the that were part of the quote unquote conscious community, which people basically thought of as the people on YouTube connected to Sinetta and that whole thing. We've seen that. Like I said, the Young Pharaoh thing, whatever's going on with that, the polite thing, whatever is happening there. I haven't seen any updates on this case, but I don't have to see any updates on this case because you see him cavorting and running around with white women. So even though he allegedly has 4 black wives, I'm gonna just be honest. If I have 4 black wives, I'm not gonna have time for anything else. You know, if I got 4 black wives, if I had 4 black wives, I would probably have 8 or 10 children. That's why I don't have 4 black wives. You know what I'm saying? It's great if you got the money, you can afford it. But I don't see how you have 4 beautiful women, um, but yet you're cavorting around with white women in Hollywood. Again, when you're not sincere, you expose yourself. The problem is with that is that those situations, um, and like I said, those are situations where the person has we don't have to debate the veracity of it. Like we see polite with the white women, so we don't have to even get into the whole accusations with the young lady and things like that. Because again, I don't know. That hasn't been adjudicated. None of us were there. So I don't want to take any stance on that either way. But the lack of sincerity exposes itself over time. And then you can be sincere and make mistakes because we all make mistakes. You know, that's the thing. I mean, if we're being honest, Marcus Garvey's situation between this first and second wives is something that when you look at, it's not. I mean, it looks. Yeah, I'm sure it looked much worse in 1920 than it does now, right? So as much as we revere and love Marcus Garvey, that his domestic life as an elder told me it was interesting. And that situation was interesting. But we never have to question his sincerity because he never tried to flim flam the people. He did. Marcus Garvey literally gave his life. He went to jail for no reason other than he's trying to save black people, right? There are not a lot of people nowadays that can say that. There's not a lot of people nowadays that be willing to do that. I'm just saying, it is what it is. We do have brothers who have been incarcerated for years, and we got new young brothers like brother Othel Wallace, who's incarcerated right now with this whole situation where he was accosted by the police. Somehow the police walked in front of a bullet some type of way. And now the brother's in jail, but he was minding his business, so I don't even understand what the problem is. Right? And the people, that's us, we have to be willing. We can't, let me say this. We can't complain that no one's doing anything about the police. And then when something happens where the police are being unjust and something happens where police end up injured, just, I mean, I wasn't there. I don't know what happened. If I was there, I wouldn't know what happened. But I wasn't there. Was nowhere near there. I certainly don't know what happened. But then we complain about the police. But then when the incident happens, and then the police who are being unjustly accosting someone, happen to suffer an injury from being unjust, then we don't support the people. We ain't got no rallies. we ain't raise no money. And then the crazy thing about that, I was going to do a show on the brother, but then this whole thing came up with some confusion about who's supposed to be representing them, who's supposed to be raising money. So I left it alone because I didn't know what was going on. I didn't know who to contact. It became a ball of confusion. And unfortunately, excuse me, one of the things that happens is that when you get into this movement and you make it your life, you're often at odds with your own family. So God forbid something happens to you, they step up and represent you or start talking or raising money for you. We don't know what can happen. How many times have we seen a victim of racial attack? Have we seen their family come up and start singing "We Shall Overcome"? Now we don't know what the person who was murdered, we don't know what they would have said because they can't talk. We don't know what they would have said if they survived. They might have said, you understand what I'm saying? They may have thought one thing before the racial attack and thought something different after the racial attack. But the families oftentimes don't even show any passion, any vitriol toward any enemy, any hatred, anything. But again, when it's one of us against our own people, everybody shooting up the place. Again, the psychology, Dr. Cargy, what's it say? The miseducation of the Negro. We're still miseducated. We still hate ourselves. We still make music talking about shooting each other every single day. We still make music calling ourselves N-words every single day. We still make music. We don't even. This is how bad it is. The men, the Negro males, the male rappers don't even have to call the women B's and H's anymore because the female rappers are calling themselves B's and H's. That's where we are mentally as a people. We the mental illness that's manifest in the black community from an African psychological perspective has reached mentacidal levels that are so dangerously close to allowing us to be wiped out. I mean, let's think about it. All black people, almost every black person in America knows about the whole Tuskegee situation. The sister did the medical apartheid. She revealed a whole lot of other stuff. A lot of people who don't really have any knowledge know about the Henrietta Lacks thing. And yet, a large percentage of black people, somewhere between 40 and 60, volunteered for a government-sponsored jab. Let's process that. It's not that people had never heard of it. It's not that people hadn't considered it. In fact, this is how the European knew that black people would be the first thing that come to black people's mind. So the first thing they said, the Europeans said, is this is not another Tuskegee. But how do we know? How would we know? I mean, there's nothing to stop them from experimenting on and or committing genocide via bioweapons against us because we're not organized to resist. So it basically comes down to the people who trust Europeans and the people who don't. That's what it came down to. There's some and there's some people with no knowledge who just generally don't. I mean, you can go off the block and see dudes who don't have no knowledge. They out there, they ain't doing nothing productive. They inward and drinking, smoking, you name it. But they don't trust no European though. I mean, you know what I'm saying? I know brothers like that. They ain't trying to hear what I'm talking about, but they don't trust it. No, you know what I'm saying? If I saw talking about that European, they're like, yeah, you right about that. They ain't gonna stop doing none of the other stuff. But they say, yeah, you right about that. Yeah, I don't trust them folks. But man, my sincerest desire has been for us to be in a better position than when I started this journey. My sincerest desire has been to carry on the torch. And um, it's so funny. I was watching a Book of Boba Fett the other day, and they were, you know, that's a Star Wars show for those who don't know. And it reminded me they were showing Luke Skywalker, and Luke Skywalker had basically pledged when he was young to pass on what he had learned, his training, his Jedi training. For those that don't know the story, um, and in many ways, when you get this knowledge, you make a pledge to pass on what you learned from the elders who will become ancestors, right? And we who were young then have become, or on the way to becoming, elders who will become ancestors. And so you understand that chain, you don't want to be the one to drop the torch. You want to be the one to pass on the knowledge. You want to be the one to pass on the training. You want to be the one to pass on the traditions. You want to be the one to pass on the understanding. And you also want to be the one to um, to give analysis necessary for the survival of your people in the time that you are in. You understand what I'm saying? So the analysis that Marcus Garvey would give in his time in the 20s, while still, unfortunately, still relevant to a degree, and the analysis that Malcolm X would give in the early 60s, while still relevant to a degree, and the analysis that Dr. Khaled would give, and Farrakhan and Amos Wilson and John Henry Clark would give in the 90s, while still relevant to a degree, is not complete for us in 2022, because we're in a time where the things that we were taught to prepare for and to look out for are now being implemented. And so the analysis, has to change and update with the times. The New World Order that was talked about in the 90s, and people pointed out when Bush said it, is the Great Reset of today. The difference is they have the technology to implement some of the stuff that was only discussed back then. We're living in it now. We see that the hats had the ability to shut down the global economy in preparation for the Great Reset. We see that Event 201, was implemented. They had a practice run and they implemented it. What I'm saying? We're in the midst of them reordering society in a way that includes the removal of large numbers of Black people from the planet. We see the moves being made. And so the analysis of that situation has to change. Me and Brother Gene were talking, and I said, now what the Europeans is doing is basically they're playing the three-dimensional chess that you see on the old Star Trek show, where I think they had like 3 chessboards, and the moves were going up and down between the chessboards and whatnot. I think it's 3. It's either 2 or 3. But they were lined up one underneath the other, and they were playing the game that way. That's the level of global chess that our enemies are playing. Zbigniew Brzezinski called it the Grand Chessboard. He had a book called The Grand Chessboard. So we're not making up things. We're not, this is not conspiracy theory. Klaus Schwab has a book called The Great Reset. We had, part of his fourth industrial revolution talks about um, removal of large numbers of people from the workforce and replacing them with robots. Like that, none this stuff isn't conspiracy theory. These are the plans of the enemy that they have publicly stated and are now implementing, and therefore the analysis of the enemy's plans and plans for a counter offensive have to be based in today's environment. And there are few people who study um, these plans and are thus qualified to give us the proper analysis and the proper strategy to resist the onslaught that's currently taking place. Greetings, Stray Black Pride, Sister Nina. I know this is early in the morning for you on the West Coast, but that that the numbers are few. And for me, one of the things I realized, it's gonna sound hilarious when I say it, at least to me, because it was hilarious when I realized it. I would sit and look on social media, and I see people talking about vast array of things, and I see people who are conscious talk about vast array of things, and I would sit and look at YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, and I used to see like, why is nobody talking about our enemies and their plans and what they're doing? Why is nobody really breaking this stuff down? Why is nobody talking about Zionism? Why is nobody talking about the World Economic Forum? And why is nobody talking about the Great Reset? And ad nauseum, right? And then I realized, because that's your job. You see what I'm saying? I realized that's your job. One of the few people who knows this stuff and has studied this stuff who hasn't had all of their platforms canceled at the same time. Which means by default, it becomes my job. That's why I was so uh, anxious to do the Dr. Khalid Muhammad lecture. For those who, if you didn't see it, I'm thinking sometime this month I'm gonna open up the link. I probably will not charge people full price. I'm gonna open up the link so people can see the raw footage from it. It won't cost the same as it did live. I'm 90% sure of that. So anybody that's interested, just if you follow me on Instagram, shoot me a DM. I'll make that announcement on Instagram. And Sister Nina says, "Oh, you on the plantation? You can get up early for them. Glad to get up for the people." Oh, okay, I understand that. Um, so yeah, I'll make for those that didn't see it. Yeah, that'll be available. It'll be a small charge, but trust me, I'll say, and I don't like to really talk about. Uh, I don't like to be the one to talk about things that I've done. I'd rather people who have seen the work, who have witnessed the work or whatever, be the ones to talk about. I don't. I'm not egotistical enough to be running around to my own horn like that. I just felt the people. I got positive feedback from the people who were there and the people who saw it online. So I thought it was I thought it was needed, you know. And one thing I realized that, at least for me, this is just for me, I need the fuel to fuel the warrior spirit to maintain in this environment as we descend further and further down um, the mountain of madness into the valley of psychological and spiritual death. And so that's why, that's one of the reasons why I did it. And two, because like I said, I don't see people really breaking down our enemies. I don't see people who really are willing to, and maybe people don't know, but really break down the how detrimental, um, how de- how detrimental small hats have been to black people, how detrimental black homophiles have been to the aspirations of black people for liberation. Um, everybody can talk about and point out the racist Yurugu, the regular racist whites. Okay, I mean we know about them. Everybody knows. You don't, what I'm saying? You don't have to point out the KKK to black people. Like, hey, watch out for them. You gotta tell them to watch out for them hats because they don't know. You gotta tell them watch out for them homophiles because they don't know. Even after all this time, that like the Black Lives Matter thing should have let people know, hey, these homophiles, they kind of a problem. They a little detrimental. I thought that they, thought they could do their own thing over there. Nah. You know, these integrationists that's laying up with Yurugu, they're a problem. You know, very few people are willing to state these things publicly. And I understand. And I mean, and this is a person that I don't like at all. There's very few people I'll say publicly that I don't like. I don't like Whoopi Goldberg, but what she said was, I mean, was not historically inaccurate. And we'll get into it, the Ashkenazi Zionist is genetically linked to Europe. The German is genetically linked to Europe. By definition, that's white on white crime. Probably just got the page deleted, but it is what it is. So even though I personally I don't like Whoopi Goldberg. I like her laying up with Yurugu that had blackface and all that, and her love for the hats and all this stuff. But what she said was accurate from a historical perspective, from a genealogical perspective, from a genetic perspective. It's white on white crime. But again, to show how the hats are your friends until they ain't, they smacked her down immediately as if she had, made a blasphemous statement. So, if you want some hat information, you need some hat ammunition to deal with some people, that Dr. Khaled lecture, that it'll help you out. Got you covered without question. Without question. So with that, brothers and sisters, I said I would only be on an hour. I've been on a little more than an hour. I thank you all for coming through. And I am going to try this time at 9 a.m. Eastern time for at least 2 to 3 times a week during February. Right now, this is kind of the best time for my schedule, and I'm going to see how well this works. And if it works, I'll continue it. If it doesn't work, I'll try a time in the afternoon, until I get a time that works for me and works for building the channel back up for the amount of time that the channel will be available. And Brother Patrick says the Nazis didn't just kill small hats; they also killed black people. Yeah, well, yeah, they did. And there's some other people thrown in too. But within the context of what she was saying, it was white on white crime because the hats didn't smack her down because of nothing that had anything to do with black people. They don't give a damn. Excuse my language. Um, to 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 them, everyone that's not them are goyim. That's their word. Means roughly cattle. So they wasn't worried about that. Because if they was worried about that, they would have corrected her historically, and they would have stated what you said, right? But they didn't. So that's how you know it's not about that. I mean, and I'll be very very quick. They have to keep up the false connection between themselves and that land that is now called Israel and that myth of the chosen people in order to get away with the things they do amongst their own people, amongst other Europeans. That's their shield, that identity of the chosen people and the whole religious connotation with that allows them to get away with doing things amongst other Europeans. We know the effect it has on black people, but you know, they have to maintain that false identity or the whole the wheels fall off the cart. And so that's why if you mention anything related to that, they will attack you immediately. And of course, I just tested that theory because we'll see how long, we'll see how long it'll be up. But you know, the good part is the videos that I have done, I have them most of them downloaded, so they can be put up in other places like otwtube.com. If they get to the point where they just get tired of me. Um, I actually had to go back. I had to go back and see um, which stuff that they had taken down off the channel that I've done because they've taken down about maybe 3 or 4 videos, but they only given me like 2 different strikes, which is one of the reasons why I haven't done content in a minute because they gave me a strike for, and I said it earlier, but reiterating, they gave me a strike for one brother Genie's commercial for one of his lectures. They gave it to me retroactively after, months after the fact. And the video had been up since May. They gave me a strike for it. So it is what it is. That's what you expect on their platform. And, if the fact they did it for a 1 minute commercial was petty. And those things last 3 months. So, that one doesn't, even though they gave it to me, I can't remember when, but that one doesn't run out till the middle of this month. I'll try my best not to get 2 more and get this whole thing deleted in the meantime. But like I said, I'm gonna try this 9 a.m. thing at least 2, maybe 3 times a week and see how it goes from there. I understand people be at the plantation and things like that. I just figured that maybe depending on people's situations, you could just plug in your earphones, you could listen to me and give yourself a little sanity depending on what your employment situation is. Because I understand, you're amongst those folks, it can be a struggle. I've been there. I understand how that goes. So it's good to see everybody that came out. Good to see Lord Bell. Good to see Sister Nina. Good to see Brother Patrick, Sister Shaniqua. Good to see y'all. Glad y'all could tune in. I'll try to send out the notifications on Instagram a little earlier. Again, I had some problems with YouTube actually sending out and posting this discussion in advance. Not surprising, of course. So with that, brothers and sisters, I thank you all for listening. I thank you all for tuning in. I thank you all for your support. Again, you can follow me on Instagram at dc.radical1, on Twitter at dc_radical_ONE, at OTWTube at DC Radical One, the Cash App, $DC Radical One. This, of course, is the YouTube, capital D, small c, Radical One. And the email is dc.radical_one at protonmail.com. That I say a BB for Hodier and straight black pride.